And we should be live. So, it's time to start painting the Tankhead, finally. Let's just update a little spinning video in the bottom right to show you what it looks like now. It should be build completed. So, it's time to start painting the Tankhead, finally. So yeah, since last, it's just been finishing up the detailing and the with stuff like adding a few more bits, riveting, some wires, some green stuff. And then it has been primed. So you can see that I've got it all up on skewers. It's been primed black. I don't have an airbrush, so it is just primed Chaos Black spray. And I'm going to paint this like I paint most of my stuff, where I am going to dry brush the main colour or two onto it, just because that gets a lot of it coloured quickly and it leaves some air, it leaves the recesses shaded, and you can also do some quick highlighting with it. So it's just something I do to save myself a lot of time, because I wouldn't really call myself, I don't do anything fancy with painting. I wouldn't particularly call myself a good painter. I just do enough to not mess up what I've built. And so I take shortcuts where I can. And one of the first and biggest ones is dry brushing. This is something I use. It's Green Stuff World, like paint flusher. It's instead of like a mug or glass with paint in, something that allows you to refresh it more easily. Put the water tank in the top, and you get a nice little pool of water that you can refresh when needed. Then we got some paper towel to dry our brush off after washing it. We got this dry brush I'll be using, which is the Artist Opus Series D Large. It is what I go for most of my stuff. It is very useful. And the two main colours we're going to be dry brushing are going to be grey and silver. It is going to be painted like most of my other AdMech stuff, and so the main colours will be those two. Kind of dull, so it doesn't. The painting doesn't look super impressive until like I get to detailing in the later stages, but it works. I'm just going through my paint trays to see what we got. For the greys, I use Mechanicus Stranded Grey, funnily enough. And I'd like to start off with a dark silver for the silver details. So I'm going to use Iron Warriors, because then, like I said, we're going to build up a simple highlight later, and going to pick out some lighter greys to go on top of the Mechanicus, and going to pick a lighter silver or two to go on top of the Iron Warriors. And I got the biggest chunks off here, but I still got the piece holder and them all on skewers to grab as and when I need. Now it's for like the legs, there's no armor on here as is, so they're going to be dry brush silver. But for pieces like the chest, where there is a lot of armor, I'm going to be dry brushing that grey. But then the arms and mechanical details on the side, I will be dry brushing those silver, and I'll just be doing my best to not spill over. Any parts I do, I will have to go and like manually fix later with a more standard brush. But I will dry brush as much as I can, because like I said, it saves a lot of time and it just builds in depth, so it saves time with both base painting and shading and a bit of highlighting. I need a palette for the dry brushing. Let's find any old random piece of cardboard I have lying around. I I'm a bit of a cheapskate. I always use like random bits of cardboard instead of any proper pallets or anything, but it works well enough. Here we go. Simple chunk of cardboard I cut from a delivery box or something. So let's start off with the Iron Warriors. Give that a good shake to make sure it's not clumped up. Get a bit on the brush, just like a small amount. Work it into the bristles. Now for this first coat, it is going to be rather a heavy coat of dry brushing, because this is like the base colour. It's to cover most of the model very quickly. And with the magic of dry brushing, it will hit the raised areas more, and the brush won't be able to make it into the recessed areas, so that gives us our built-in shading, probably saying for the umpteenth time. But like I said, I do this for pretty much every model I build, just because I find it so useful and time-saving, because I still kind of dread, like, hand painting large chunks. Like, some of the first things I painted it was an army of Stormcasts, and it was the Sequitors? The guys with the robes on top of their armor. And so I'd spray paint those silver, and then I'd have to hand paint all the robes red, and I remember spending so much time doing that. And it worked out well in the end. It gave me a lot of experience with like knowing how to thin paints properly and making sure I always had enough on my brush and knowing about paint, I don't know, paint flow and all that, but it does take a lot of time. And like I said, I enjoy the building way more than I enjoy the painting. Like I said, I just do the painting so I can finish the model. And I do it to a quality just to, I don't know, just to not ruin what I've built. So I just don't go crazy with it. I pretty much just do the basics and whatever I can get away with. You can be a bit rough with it in these early stages, just because it is trying to get the paint everywhere at least. And I'll try and do most of this silver. Well, I've already got it on the brush. So that is a decent first pass for the legs. After I've done everything else, I'll take a better look at it and see if there's anywhere else I need to hit or redo. And so then, we got silver out. Let's do the mechanical part of the chest. Yeah, just making it's really worked into the brush and kind of dried out. So we're avoiding the face. We are going around the shoulders. Well, avoiding the front of the chest. Just because this works particularly well with all the detailing it out of the shoulder areas earlier, because now it has all those lovely mechanical details, and so the dry brushing will just help hit a lot of that. And do the underside while I'm at it. I'll also hit some of the wires because I'll also hit the wires with this because while I will colour some with like regular block colours later, there are some which I use a contrast paint over the metal, which looks really good. Don't need to worry too much about being super precise with the underside since I don't think people are really going to see it. Just make sure to get the lights, just because there's a lot of mechanical housing around the lights. Even though I'll probably mess that up with the armor color later. Now we can probably move on to the other side. So, in terms of general hobby stuff, I think the old world stuff has come out now. Just before I went live, I watched a video from Pete the Wargamer about some rank fillers, which was a neat uh, concept because the old world has the whole regimented blocks of units. You can put some random stuff in between them to help fill out your army and also add some thematic detail, and I quite like the idea of that. Don't think I'll do it. I'm not really planning on getting into the old world, but I like smaller terrain bits which just allow you to make use of spare bits and link in thematically. Hello, the Cornish Knight. Yeah, that's what I was watching. I saw his cool pillar of floating stuff for his Tomb Kings, because I had a lot of fun making kind of objective markers for Kill Team. I'll see if I can find some as an example now, because like I said, it reminded me of the unit fillers because they're small things that can just help give like flavour and have some use in games. Because Kill Team is one of the few things I actually do play. Yeah, here's a few things I got because I usually play Kill Team with my AdMech against my girlfriend's Necrons, and so we got some objective markers which are like a command console, relay signal thing, and then something to match each of our units. Got a little Skitari who has been unfortunately impaled on some type of Necron device, which was based on something from the Mechanics game, and some of the like dungeon events you can encounter in that, and then a somehow captured Necron being like kept in a kind of stasis. But yeah, fun little flavor builds you can do, which just use up some spare parts, but can help add some nice detail to armies or games in this case. And that should be good for the shoulders. It's still a tad patchy, but since this is on like the upper part of the unit, that will be hit a bit more with the highlights. So if it's not completely covered now, I'm not worried too much about it. Is there anything I need to do on the head? This is the kind of smoke grenade launchers, which I'll do while I can, but this is going to be a way more this is a piece which has way more armor on it, so that will be hit a lot more with the grey dry brush later. What other mechanical stuff do I have to do while I'm at it? Got the kind of spotlight. Should the barrel be silver, or should it be the same grey with the rest of the armour? Let's see. Barrel silver in that tank head. Barrel silver in that tank head. We're going with the silver barrel. So yeah, that's I think what I need to do on the turret. Just in terms of base colour blocking out. Now what else is there? I have some of the arms, they're in all big chunks, so there is some armour I need to have, well, I will be getting around to later, but for now I will get like all the mechanical details of the inner and upper arms. There you go, this, like I said, dry brushing worked great with all the random mechanical detail I've added in the converting stage. You can see it really working well with the detailed part to hit the raised areas the most and leave the recessed areas shaded. So I cannot, I don't know, praise this technique enough. Where's the other arm? There it is. Like I said, I use this for everything I do. I dry brush for pretty much everything I do. Like it's how I think I get a good scheme for my Black Templars, because I build up lots of depth with like a slightly off black, then working up to a grey, and then even doing very light dry brushing with a bright grey just to give them some built-in highlights, because it is tricky painting Black Templars and having them look good, because something that normally makes these models look great is the shading step, where you use your washes, but you can't do that on black because black is already one of the darkest colours, well, the darkest colour you can use, so you can't really make it any darker in the recesses. And so you have to highlight up a lot with black, and dry brushing just allows you to do that very quickly. Here is the main hull gun. Hull gun is armour coloured there. How do I do it on my other one? On my other one, I did leave it mostly black, but with I highlighted it with silver, so I wanted to just make it look like a kind of worn metal. So I will do that again. I will not re-up on the silver, just to keep it kind of light. Yeah, to make it look like a very dirty but worn and brushed metal. I will focus a bit more on the kind of strands around the struts, supports, metal things on the side, just because they are going to be proper silver. And then most of the rest of the stuff I've got up here on my skewers is armor panels, so they're going to be mostly grey armor. There's this detail that pops onto the back of the hull, chest, chassis, whatever you want to call it, and that's going to be silver. This is a kind of, I don't know, I've used this paint for a while, so it does tend to like clump and stick at the bottom, so I do need to shake it up every so often. kind of awkward to hold, but yeah, I'll manage. My hands will get a little paint on them, but as you can see, my nails are black, and a lot of my fingertips are around that just because I hit my fingers with some of the... My fingers caught some of the spray paint when I was basing it in the black anyway, so I'm not too fussed. And since this is just the rough first coat, I'm not too worried about like hitting it from any particular direction or keeping light. I can just go relatively heavy with this coat and just go out in circles to make sure I can hit it from all angles. I think this should be one of the final pieces. This is like slots into the chest, and I have magnetized it, so I can swap the gun out if I want to later. Now, painting the Tankhead might be a little tricky, just figure out the specifics of what colour do I paint this detail with, just because it's can't always easily get a one-to-one translation from the inspiration, because I'm not doing the paint scheme that's up there. I'm doing a grey to make it match my AdMech, but I have built built an onager before, and like I did with the gun here, I looked at a previous model I did, so I can always look at my older stuff for inspiration. So while how the scheme translates from the Tankhead won't help, my previous knowledge will. And just checking what else I have on skewers. Because everything else is going to be mostly armor now. No, I can't hit the brush is too big to get into the nooks and crannies of like the hands and anything else, so I guess that is it for the silver now. That was quick. I'll just make sure to try and use up what's left on my brush, just by being even rougher going over this the legs, which are pretty much all silver. Because the less that's on the brush now, the easier it'll be to clean. And we get to use the fancy Green Stuff World brush rinser. Now, since this is a rather large brush, it will probably take a bit to finally get it all out. Okay, now that's mostly out. There's still a bit of silver on the brush, but that is alright since we are painting a bit more silver now. Just doing a very simple, like, immediate highlight for that. Because yeah, it's, like I said, it's Green Stuff World brush rinser, it's called. I saw a TikTok of it. I saw it, like, another painter using it on TikTok. Thought, oh, that looks handy, and yes, it is a bit like a toilet, but it works. And I frequently order from Green Stuff World anyway, just because they have a lot of tools, they have a lot of materials, like textured plasticard, or a new hobby saw, or some files or whatever, so I just threw it in the next order I got. Just feeling it with my fingers just to check when it's fully, well, not dry, but so it's not completely wet and will ruin the paint when I try to dry brush the next layer. And so the next layer is going to be a highlight for the silver we just did, and for that we're going to use a bright silver. We're going to use Iron Hands steel. Went with Iron Warriors, now we're on Iron Hands. And this one is, like I said, this is just going to be a quick highlight. So we'll get less on the brush, and we're primarily trying to just go hit it from the top down. So instead of brushing all over in circles, we're going to go top down. I will do proper edge highlighting with the brush later. It's just this gives a good, like, immediate, quick blast of it. And need to keep in some consideration of how the model, how it all goes together. Like, this waist, this is going to be, you can see it on the turntable thing down there, it is going to be sitting under the chest, so it's not going to have a lot of upward light from above hitting it, so we're not going to touch that at all. But the sides of the hips kind of are, and like the back of the ankles, and maybe the feet. Mainly on the like outside, because the inside it's going to be covered by the hips and the rest of the body, so we're just hitting it very lightly on like the outermost parts. And that's all we're doing for it, because that is a lower part of the model, so it doesn't get much light from above. Now, on the contrary, you can see the shoulders here will, because they are near the top. But still, this is only highlights, so I'm not getting too much on the brush. Making sure it's fully worked in. And just hitting the upper edges going down. I have tried a few different metallics, because I do use Games Workshop stuff a lot, and I do want to try and branch out. I tried Pro Acryl's Dark Silver, and that was good, but that had a bit too much of a blue tint to it. So it was my girlfriend used it for her Necrons, and that worked well, but I couldn't exactly swap scheme midway through for my AdMech with it. But I have heard good things about Duncan's paint range. I do want to try his, I think it's Surcoat's Silver. And then I've also always heard good things about Vallejo's, what's it called? Like a chrome colour range. So that's another one I want to test out. Just quickly hitting the essential spots, upward facing with the tank head. Can go a bit heavier on the highlighting because this sits at the very top of the model, so it will get the most highlights. There are going to be the arms, so that's the inside of the arm, that's the outside. The outside is going to get a bit more highlights, but you can see the forearms will kind of be facing up, so hit those with a quick blast. What other metals do we have? We have this thing that sits on the back of the onager part. So that's going to get a bit of highlights. You can see I'm just brushing like the silver off if I do dab too much on the brush from the paint pot. And now just trying very loosely, trying only to catch the edges from the top down. How many of each model kit did you make for Tankhead? Was it one kit? Yes, it was. Well, I hoard bits, and I have lots of leftover stuff. Like the onager was completely left over from this Scorpius model I made, because you can see I used the legs from the Onager, but I obviously didn't use the cab, so the cab is completely left over. That is only one Onager cab. It's one set of some armature legs. The things that did come from two of a kit were the armature shoulders. I use those for the shoulder joints again, but one armature kit only comes with one shoulder because it's the specific joint they use for the chainsword. So that might be something there, but other than that one extra shoulder, I'm pretty sure it's one onager, one armature. But then there are random bits from all over, like this is like a Baneblade turret, which I got in a second-hand pile of bits, because it's an optional part the original build it didn't make it with. And the hands are from a Castellan robot. But they're also an optional part, so you might be able to find those second-hand easy too. What else goes into here? There are some like Cataphren parts, just to like their tread armor to detail some of the sides, and I used some of their weapon barrels to extend the upper and lower arm chunks. So the skeleton of the kit, it is one onager, one armature, but a few details come from all over, honestly. Now, did anything else need dry brushing? Yes, this gun thing. And instead of going back from the pot, I can use some of the excess I brushed off earlier. And is that going to be all the silver now? Oh yeah, kit bashing stuff is great, and the more I've gotten into kit bashing, the more leftover bits I've had to use in the next kit bash, so it's just kind of been a snowball effect. With the more kit bashes I do, the even more kit bashes I'm able to do in the future. Even, I'm not sure if you'd call it kit bashing, just like different assembly of a model. Like kit bashing a model, I don't know, kind of with itself, but only one of them is just like I'm not sure you'd call it like a different, just assembling it differently. Like the last Onager I did, and this was one of my first big kit bashes. I turned it into this spider tank, and I think it's all just from one Onager kit. Didn't need to use anything else. I just, instead of putting the cab on the top like that, I turned it around and attached it to the back. And there's the sensor bit which was used for the eyes, there's little manipulators which would be from the front of the cab anyway, there's weapons just turned around, and there, you can see it's the front of the armature, but it's the same kit, it just has a totally different look. So you can even, like I said, kit bash a kit with itself, and just make a whole new thing just from putting it together differently. Now, I think that's the silvery bit. So, gonna wash the brush. Make sure it's a bit more thorough this time since we're going with a different colour. Oh, I need some Rough Riders. Yeah, that's a fairly new Cadian kit. I do like seeing kind of, feudal worlds? I think they're people is the term for them, where they use like old world style kits and make them into like a less advanced. Considered doing, because one knight I made, one full Imperial Knight, what's it called, a Questoris class, I made that inspired by like more traditional knights, and so it's this guy, my knight Lancelot. And so I did add a bit of flair where it's like the pilot, I gave him like a classical helmet plume. And so I was considering, could I do like a feudal world style guard or something to go around him. Yeah, kind of stuff is great. It's like the 40k setting is huge and almost anything can go on in it, so you can build almost anything for it. Which is an excuse I use a hell of a lot with my kit bashes. Like this one. This was inspired by, obviously, what's on the right, the Tankhead by Emerson Tongue. And it's like, oh, that's some, like, alternate history steam diesel punk. I believe he calls it World War I to World War II era. And it's like, oh, those are weird weapons of war. I'm sure the AdMech has something like that. So I can make one of those myself and throw it in my AdMech army without any qualms. Yeah, feudal world stuff is great. There's someone I follow on Instagram who's been doing a lot of that with the new, not the old world, the Bretonia? Not Bretonia. Cities of Sigmar. He's been like mixing Cities of Sigmar and Skitarii bits. Let me see if I can find it exactly. Because it's not something I do myself, because I'm always caught up in my next mecha kit bash. Yes, it is Victor, VICTOR.CVR on Instagram, and he does, like, his current project is like mixing Cities of Sigmar with, I don't know, some AdMech bits, some Imperial Guard bits, just having a cool feudal world, but still with some tech. And we are on to the greys now. So, starting off with my Mechanicus Standard Grey. And we're going to be hitting all the big chunks of armor with this. Ooh. Yeah, I've been wanting to try something with the new Imperial Guard Sentinel. Even not with it itself, it just seems like a good, not base to build on, but like you could proxy a lot of stuff as a Sentinel. So is that your feudal world you just play some full 40k with? Because a feudal world seems like you could, I don't know, go between games with it, use it for like a Cities of Sigmar, or maybe even, yeah, use it as a Cities of Sigmar or an Imperial Guard. Just getting lots of use out of it. Okay, so let's start this on a, not the chest, let's start it on a not as noticeable piece, in case we do mess it up, just to test and make sure it's... Practice on a less important thing first. Yeah, just trying it on a shin pad. It is a bit splotchy and inconsistent because it is just the first layer, so not worrying too much about not having a good coat. First coat, in the wise words of Duncan Rhodes, too thin coats helps even when dry brushing. Oh. Sounds good. I've yet to fully play a full 40k game. When I first got into it, I played a game with a friend, and I've played lots of kill teams since then, but I've never actually used my army as a got to play with my full AdMech. Like all my cool creations are, I don't know, they're just there to look pretty currently. 1 Cadian command squad, 2 Cadian shock troopers, 1 blob. Yeah. Sounds good. I always like to think about, how I'd run this with that, and I'd group this unit up with that, and they'd look good together, and thematically that can go that, and it helps with inspiration for building. But like I said, those plans have yet to see actual light of day with use. Yeah, just working my way through dry brushing the. Oh yeah, the Chimera. That's one of the, I don't know, armored personnel character type things. They're like, it's got treads, but it's not got a full turret. I don't know what the proper term for it was, but I did look at it when I was trying to find a small turret for this guy. And the hands. See, these are just sticking on with magnets, so I'm not sure I'll have that good of a. Might not be clipped on that strongly enough to survive the dry brushing, so I'll have to hold it with my fingers maybe. APC, yeah. Okay, yeah. Because I know the AdMech have the Scorpius thing I showed off. The Scorpius, it's the Dune Rider and then the Scorpius Disintegrator, which it kind of pulls 2-in-1 duty for both troop carrier and a tank. I do hope the AdMech get like their own dedicated tank, because they have the Dune Crawler, but that's a tad small. I don't know, I wouldn't exactly call it a proper tank, but I'll probably just I don't really complain too much about stuff lacking units, because if I really want it, then I'll just make it myself. That is something that I often see that is annoying. It's like, oh man, that's a cool kit. It's like, that's Legends, or that's no longer supported, or that weapon option has changed. It's the unfortunate nature of the game, I guess. Like, there's lots of cool robot units that the AdMech have in Horus Heresy when they're the Mechanicum. Like, I think it's like the Thanatar Battle Automata or whatnot, but they're resin, I'm not sure if they're supported, because the Horus Heresy is going through some like revamp now. They got all the plastic World of Darkness stuff, and it's just cool models, but not sure if it's worth getting into. Yeah, it's balance is weird. Like, I often see people go, "Oh man, I love this unit, but I'm not just can't use it anymore because it sucks." And it's like, it's like, because it kind of divorces the looks from the how it plays, which, so it's like, I love the look of it, but it's just not worth running in the game. So it's like, that's unfortunate. There's something you want to use, but it's just kind of unfeasible. I think that is all mostly done with the smaller armor now. Got the hip piece, one shoulder, and then we can move on to the big chunks. but I just want to practice, just get back into the swing of things with smaller stuff and just work my way up to the bigger stuff, because I often do go a while without painting just because building takes longer than painting. Like, I started building this early December. Yeah, proxies. I get away with so much by just going, I could just proxy it as this, or I could proxy it as that. It's like, I don't like the look of this model, I'll just use this as a proxy for that. Like, this onager, I'm calling it an onager tankhead, and it uses its kit bash of an onager and armager, onager and an armager, and I'm just going, I could use it as a onager for my AdMech army, or I've probably got enough Imperial Knights now to run just as that, so I could run it as an armager too. And running it as an armager, I believe opens it up to more rules wise, because Imperial Knights can ally with most Imperial forces, so it's even the chance of maybe throwing it along with my Black Templars if I ever use those in a game too. Those are all the main armor pieces. There is this like armor panel dome on the side of this weapon mount. So now is where it starts to get a bit finicky with the dry brushing, because now I've got to make sure to not hit, or try my best to minimize dry brushing areas I've already touched with other colors, because dry brushing saves time, but it won't save time if I go over the other stuff I've dry brushed. That works. Is there a proxy transport option for the guard, which was a Terox and a Chimera bashed together? More like a cross between a Helmet, Snowcast, and it's always just seeing cool what people come up with for their own kit bashes. Like, that's one of the reasons why I do my best to share mine, in case anybody else finds it cool and wants to give it a go themselves. Like, I know I shared my stuff on TikTok, and that Doomcrawler Spider Tank alternate build I showed earlier, that had like 2 people going, man, that's cool, I want to make it myself. And it's just wild what everyone can come up with and help, I don't know, inspire other people to do the same. Trying very hard to avoid the silver parts on the forearm. Overspilled a little, but for now that's as much as I can do on there with the dry brushing, and just have to fix it with a normal brush later. I always like seeing different guard stuff, because like the default is the Cadians, but then there's so many different cool regiment styles I wish we could see more of. Like, there was the Attilan Rough Riders. They're the ones that got the cavalry unit, and like there's always the go-to Krieg, and they got their kill team units. But there's stuff like, I want to see the like Elysian troopers, the Elysian drop troopers, because they're the guys with all those cool jetpacks. And I've seen a few cool kit bashes of them using the there's a Necromunda kit. I think they're like Orlok. They're not Orlok Arms Masters. They're Orlok something, but they've got a cool jetpack, and I've seen a few of them used to make Elysian drop troopers a lot, and that seems like a nice, neat idea. And I hope for an official kit, because those are cool jetpack parts I could use myself. With any luck, they'll get a kill team or something like the Krieg did. And now I can finally start on the chassis. Look at the Wargames Atlantic Death Fields. I will make a note to go and look that up when I'm done streaming. It's nice seeing all the like different stuff that different companies can come up with for proxies. Because I think there's Mortian. He's doing a lot of cool Necromunda terrain, along with he just has a bunch of cool walking tanks. But unfortunately, a lot of those proxies, still boxes. You can when you're in a box, you can make a whole regiment of Steel Legion for like 200. Yeah, not bad. But unfortunately, a lot of third-party proxies and stuff, they're resin, which it works if you just want them for an army as is. But I always got to kit bash stuff, and resin is not fun to kit bash with. But some people keep that in mind, like second time mentioning the stream, Pete the Wargamer. I saw he's got a Kickstarter for dead animal bits, and they're actual plastic, which is very nice attention to detail for kit bashing. Though I shouldn't be surprised that him of all people is considering the kit bashers. I'm getting a few like bristles and hairs coming off the brush doing this. It's just the nature of dry brushing, but I'm just wondering how much longer how much more life this brush has in it. Something that can happen if you're not too careful, where like a hair comes off the brush, and then it's like you notice it too late, and then when you go back to the second coat, it's like, oh no, one of the hairs is like dried into the paint already. But like I said, it is just something that happens with dry brushing, especially such large parts of it like I do. Like this is one I've been using quite a bit, and you can see it compared to like a new one. This one is a size up, but it's like large versus extra large, and you can see like how much I've worn it down just because of how often I use it. How can I hold this without getting too much paint on my fingers now? This always feels iffy and feels like, oh no, the paint's not thick enough. Oh no, it looks terrible. Oh, it's too streaky. Oh, it's got terrible coverage. But you just gotta trust the process and come back over it with a second coat later, rather than going too heavy on the first coat and making it weirdly thick and ruining it. I don't need to paint that recessed area, because that's going to be covered by the weapon mount at least. Now, while I am thinking about it now, I'm not sure what to do with this like front sight guard, because you can see on the Inspiration Tankhead it's the same colour as the armour, and similar for like the eye flaps there. I've previously done it silver, copper, like my secondary metal colour, what I use for accents, and it does stand out quite a bit. So I'll try and hit it with the grey paint as I'm doing that batch now, and just see how it looks like, because I can always go over it again later just in case. Now, this brush might be a bit too big. What smaller ones have I got? I've got the medium one. That is a lot of difference. I'll do what I can with the large for now and see. Again, I'm not sure this is going to be a strong enough connection, so I'm just going to have to hold it by hand. Now it's getting awkward with ways to hold it without getting paint on my hands, and I do need to be careful of the turret itself because it's not as strong as a connection as I thought it was, because it got a little loose while I was disassembling it all to get it primed. I did go and obviously re-plastic glue it, but still want to be cautious. Yeah, this is getting to the point where there's too many nooks and crannies for the large brush to get into. I'll... Is it worth switching to the small just for this one bit? Or can I just make do? I'm going to switch to the smaller dry brush. Because this is... If this was a less noticeable area, I'd go, leave it. Just be lazy. But this is the titular head of the Tankhead, and it's right at the top, and it is where a lot of people are going to be looking, so I will get in there with the smaller brush. Let me turn my camera light on just to help see, because the light from above is useful, but there are certain areas where the shadow it casts is throwing me off in terms of finding what I need to. Okay, that's looking decent for a first coat. I'll give the brush a quick rinse, just because I don't want it to get too clumped up with paint, even though I will be just using more of the same paint in a minute. Whew, we're an hour in already. Damn, the whack went quick. I do want to get all the dry brushing done, at least, for this painting session. I do want to see if I can paint this whole thing in about an hour. Jesus Christ. I want to see if I can paint this whole thing in a week. Just because painting is kind of the shortest part of making a model for me, because I mentioned this before, but I think it's like I've been building this for a month now. Then you're going to take a week or so off for Christmas stuff, but building is the way more involved part of my models. This is a large dry brush, so it does take a lot to like fully dry it out, so I might need to change kitchen rolls already. Just leave that on the side to dry out, just because it will be good in a second. Okay, an hour in. I'm going to stand up and stretch and do a pull-up, just to make sure I don't give myself a hunched over back. Okay, that's good. Nice sip of water, and we're refreshed and ready to go for the second coat of the grey dry brush. The metallics, I think they're good with just the one coat each. Just because, if we look at this is an example which is... We've got the two Tankhead examples. The one on the right was more for the build and armaments, and the one on the left was more for armor and color, because the one on the left is close to the AdMech color scheme I normally have. And so you can see for the metal bits on this, you can see it's way darker, way more worn. So I am fine with having like a thinner coat of metal for that. And yeah, metals don't look as bad when they're like a streaky coat anyway, especially when dry brushed. But it is a tad noticeable for the grey. So we've got still got most of our armor up on skewers here. Ooh, that armor fell off its skewer. I'm going to need to re-glue that in. Yeah, the dry brushing can be a tad rough on some things, so that's not too surprising. Do I have some dried glue is blocking the nozzle of my glue bottle, so let's get one of the paper clips I normally use to pin stuff with and just clean that out. Okay, that should be good. Re-glued. Repinned. not too worried about that because once this is all painted, it's going to be fully glued together. I'm not going to do the same thing as I did on my Titanfall one and have it magnetized, just because that was a lot of hassle for something that I rarely actually like use it and use the magnets and take off the armor often, so it's fun, but wasn't really worth it in the end. Just shaking up the grey to make sure it's all nice and consistent for our painting. Oh! I missed the armoured part of this. I'll hit it right now, and I got the small brush out, so why not do it there? And then hopefully I can come back to that. By the time I come back to that at the end of the second coat of the rest of the stuff, this will be ready for its own second coat. Okay. There we go. And back to the armor panels. This is the second coat, so it should help just get... With this one we should be looking to get a nice even coverage because it is a dark-ish colour on top of black, so it shouldn't... We shouldn't need to go like 3 coats or anything to get a nice coverage. Like I said, this is the method I use for most of my painting. Start with black, dry brush the main colour. The only time I don't is when it is going to be like a mostly white scheme, because then it's probably better starting from a white spray and then starting from white spray and then shading down. Like for my shoulder pads of my Black Templars, because it would be such a pain to paint white over black, I do separate them and separate the shoulder pads from the rest of the model and prime them differently. Like for my Dreadnought I got on the side here, I had the shoulder pads separately and only glued them on at the very end. Just because it's hard to paint white over black and it's hard to paint black over white, just because they're so different and they need so many coats. But in general, white in particular is a hard colour to get right. Like, I know a lot of Games Workshop's whites aren't very good coverage-wise. Their new spray, I think it's White Scar, maybe? But their new white spray is alright. I still don't think their pots are that good, though. And if I do ever need to use like a hand paint pot white, I go with Pro Acryl's Bold Titanium White. It still does dry a bit weird on its own, but it's overall way better coverage than any of Game Workshop stuff. It's similar to what I mentioned before, where I use a lot of Game Workshop stuff, but I do want to branch out. Just because a lot of different paint ranges have their own different strengths and weaknesses. Like Games Workshop's, they've got well, they had some great washes before they like weirdly diluted them. Some of the contrasts are pretty good for effect paints, which I'll be using for this later. Their reds are pretty good. I love corn red, but their bright colours, like their whites, do not do as well, and their metallics are alright, but I've heard better things about metallics from other ranges, which I want to try out. Oh, I think our music stopped. Let's get that going again. I'm just trying to find some simple background music. What I've currently got on is Chilled Skull 2, Lo-Fi Loyalist Beat to Relax / Study 2, which is good enough. Miscellaneous. Paintings, like Warhammer style music. Like I would love to have soundtrack for like Darktide or the Admech game on, but I'm not sure how that would work. Like copyright wise, like might get the stream taken down or muted, or I don't know, definitely the video, whatever. So I'm trying to play it safer with, I don't know, less conspicuous stuff for now. I'll try and find out to have better background music later. But I am just still figuring this whole streaming stuff out. But I do have a few ideas. Like currently I've just got a very basic layout of my webcam, my desk cam view here, and then some stuff in the top right and bottom right. But I was thinking of seeing if I could make a fancy layout using some of my art as a background, like using my terrain piece, or thinking what else I could use, like to put at the sides for references. Like I'm going to need to find something else once I'm done with my Tankhead for the bits in the corners. So if any of you guys listening have any good ideas, let me know. Those are the main arm panels with their second coat of grey, and that looks to be good enough. Because like we did with the they got good coverage on now, and like we did with the silver, I will be going over a light highlight, which will help. Well, obviously highlight, but it will also partially be another layer, which will help with some more coverage issues. Well, it will help with the coverage issues by making them less noticeable. Because coverage is very noticeable if it is just like one color that's not everywhere, but if you have multiple colors on there, like a brighter gray, that might give in to make it seem more like a gradient or weathering or shading. So sometimes bad coverage is something that can help you, but you can't just have bad coverage and leave it as is. You gotta do some more work to have it work back in your favor. What is next? We got this, the weapon mount. That is good enough. Then the turret head. With which, again, I'm going to start with the large brush and just do the broad strokes, but swap to the small one afterwards. Well, I believe it's actually the medium dry brush, but scale is all relative when you're working on something larger than the normal model size. Back to small. Now, while we're dry brushing and going to be doing the highlights for it too, I'm going to try and cheat and try to help it with some, maybe try to do some like pre-baked OSL, some object source lighting. So for areas like the front of this where you're going to have like fancy optic lights there, I'm going to try to dry brush more highlights around that specifically. Just because, one, that will do some kind of pre-baked OSL, object source lighting, but that'll also make painting the brighter colours on required for that later. That will make that more easy too. And I'm all about making my time painting easier. I am not a superb fancy painter, like I'm not going to be winning any golden demons. I'm no Louise from Rogue Hobbies. I'm not going to do many layers of glazing and all that. The most I do is a space colour, one dry brush highlight or two, and then one final edge highlight or two at the end. Even for fancy glowing light effects, like this console I did, which I mentioned earlier as a like small pre-built. These screens, they are white with a layer or two of contrast paint over them, just slathered all over, not worrying about any specific placement for them. So that saves me time in that aspect, because it is easy, and I will always take a good easy painting trick. Okay, it should be the last piece we need to dry brush the base grey on. So that's been hour 20, hour and a half. Not bad for getting like the biggest chunks of paint done on this relatively big model. There we go. Because last time round I said, oh, it's always nerve-wracking painting such large pieces with dry brushing. Because, the first coat never looks great. But now it's shaping up pretty nicely. Not worrying too much about perfect coverage on the top part here, because most of this is going to be covered by the turret. And with that, I think that is the first, that is like the grey done. Well, the base grey. Let me refocus. Yeah. So washing it, you can see still a lot of greys coming off, so I want to get decently clean brush, but not stressing about it being super clean, because I am going to be going back in with another grey highlight, and having a bit of the last grey left over will help, because it will blend the colours somewhat, so will make the highlight look match better, because you will have some of the old colour mixed in there. Like, that's, I don't go fancy with highlights, but that is something I've learned. If you do want to build up more highlights, you can have your base paint and then your highlight, and then for a first level of highlights you mix the two, and so then that's a perfect in between transition that will help you build up to your later highlights a bit better. Just work the dark colour into the brighter one, so the transition between the two is much smoother. And just drying it off. Not, like I said, not worrying about too much about getting the paint off there, because that will help. And so, what is one colour up from Mechanicus Standard Grey? Let's go take a look at the paint tray. Here is my cheapskate paint tray made out of spare cardboard. And here is my section of greys. I have Dark Reaper, which it's way too blue, I guess. And there is Eshin Grey. I like that one, but it is too similar to worth bothering with. And so then the next one up from that is going to be Dawnstone. That is what we're looking for. Eshin Grey I like, but it's not particularly necessary on the AdMech for the Mechanicus Standard Grey. I use Eshin Grey for my Black Templars, mostly. So, not using Mechanicus anymore, so we can put that one back. Take a second to try and clear up the desk a little, so I'm just not constantly losing space. Okay. Highlighting the grey now with Dawnstone. How's the paint looking? Not too bad. Is there a Fenrisian Grey? I don't have Fenrisian Grey, no. If I look it up, I believe it's more on the bluer side, which I don't want to go too far into blues. It works well for Space Wolves because they have like a blue-grey, which is, I don't know why it's called Fenrisian Grey. But it would work if that's what you're going for, it's just that's not the exact colour I want right now. Fenrisian Grey. Let's look it up to get a good idea. Yeah, that works. That's quite a blue-grey. It would work well for dry brushing onto a black or whatever, but like I said, I prefer to go in a... I don't want my greys leaning too blue. If anything, I'd prefer to make them lean the other side of having like a warmer, like having hints of brown. But I see plenty of people do that. Like with their Black Templars, they go for a black base, then they go for Dark Reaper, which I pointed out earlier. That's more purpley, bluey, black. Then they go with like Fenrisian, because that's a blue-grey that would help highlight, brighten it that side. So yeah, would work, just not what I'm going for personally. So I've got my Dawnstone here. It is still a tad damp. Okay, that should be good. And similar to what I did with the brighter silver, where I'm being way lighter with the application this time, and I'm trying to focus on only going like top down. So again, let's start with the armor. Now this, again, got to consider like where the piece sits for the highlights to work. Like this is shin armor, so this is going to be like at the very bottom and mostly covered below the knee, because these are like the weird backwards knee chicken leg type things. So I'm only gonna try to lightly be hitting the top edges and like the outer edge there. And that worked for that. Where's the other one? Shin piece. There's the other shin piece. What's next on the pieces on the armor to get? That is the shoulder. So shoulder, upper outer part will get a lot more layer of highlighting, so we can be a bit heavier with that. Still relying on a lot of the way the dry brush works, where it will hit more of the edges itself while brushing over it. That's good. What's next? The hip. So how does the hip sit? Yeah, the front chest sticks out a lot, so the hip doesn't get a huge amount of light. But what I mentioned before with like the object source lighting, you can see one of the details I put in was like a floodlight on the middle of the hip, so I will be focusing a lot around that. Yeah, highlighting isn't particularly necessary, but I think it's easy enough to do while I'm dry brushing here, so I will do it. Different people go however far they like with their models. I think so long as you do a wash, because a wash is magic in a bottle. It settles in the recesses itself, so you just need to go over the entire model with it, make sure it's not pooling, and then it automatically adds a huge amount of detail. I think that's what Games Workshop calls battle ready, then highlights are parade ready. But it was just, ever since I started learning, it was like instilled in me, like I watch a lot of the Duncan's tutorials, and that instilled in me the heavy metal basics, where it's base color, wash, highlight. with the highlights being an extra optional fancy step at the end, but I don't know, I find highlighting can be equally soothing and stressful. It really makes corners pop, but you go, oh, don't spill over, oh, I gotta get really precise. So I do highlighting, like I'm doing an easy version of it here with the dry brushing, and I will do it later, but I'd like to keep it kind of minimal. Like, I don't know, let's go to a less is more approach with it. And I don't do any fancy like layering or glazing. And this is the thigh armor. It is upwards facing at an angle, but it is below the chest. I will try to hit the like outer edges slightly a bit on the upper one, but also the lower ones. You haven't even washed any of them. It's fine. People use them for different purposes. Like, mine are mostly to sit on my shelf and look pretty and to be fun building. And so, painting is way more important to me than it would be someone like, presumably you, because you talked a lot about, like, actually playing with your stuff. So, to you, they're more like game pieces than they are to display pieces. It's something about Warhammer. There's all these different facets to it. Facets? All these different sides to it, where some people just play the game with them. Some people build with them. Some people fully go out all the way with like art, and like I said, with like the Golden Demon competitions and go wacky. I mean, I've entered a fair few painting competitions at my local hobby shops, but I was always more entering them just to try out a cool idea with a build and maybe win a prize for it. Never to win a prize for my painting. Okay, that's the arm panels up there done. I've got a basic layer of highlighting on them now. Time to do the bits that are on my desk. Now these arms, they'll be sitting like that, so I need to hit them from coming down that direction. But most of the areas facing on the upwards facing on this part are silver anyway, so the grey itself doesn't actually get a lot of highlighting. That's that. This is the gun mount. While I swapped to the small brush for this before, just to get in the like finicky areas right by the barrel, I don't think I need to here, because I can just hit it from above. Yeah, it's always nice to go extra fancy on your leader models, just because they will be the focus of the army anyway. But you want to let the scheme mature in a way. What do you mean by that? Like, sit on it more, figure out where exactly you want to take it first? Because I can get that, because my scheme is like definitely like matured since I first started painting my Admech. Like when I first started painting, I didn't really even have any orange in it, but now that's when I was first doing it, it's like I thought, oh, now it's a bit too grey, and so I was looking for what I can do, and then adding like splashes of orange in here and there. I believe that helped it a lot. And then I found more of the complementary colours to help highlight with it, so you do definitely practice more as it comes along. Yeah, there. It is something to consider keeping like a color scheme consistent. Like I'm careful not to add too many bright colors because it is a mostly grey scheme, so any colors that are there do stand out a lot. Like I go with orange for main details, but then if I want to detail something and make it a different color, I don't want it to stand out, I'd use way duller colours, like I use a dull green or a dull red for like cables a lot, or I use a darker metal, because it helps give that colour distinction, but like you said, it doesn't take away from the model. If that's what you mean, that is. It's, I don't know, I'm sure there's some lessons of colour theory you could look into to get a deeper understanding, but I just liked what I did. Oh yeah, anything really stands out on black. I know that from my Black Templars, because when I first did them I tried a gold I used, and that was a gold I used for the armor trim of my Stormcasts, and the gold trim worked beautifully for Stormcast because it was over a silver, which was relatively bright and it matched well. But then when I tried to put that same gold over the Black Templar's black, it came off as almost like a cartoonish orange, just because it was way brighter. So it's like, okay, yeah, you got to be more careful with how colours look on other colours, especially the black. Uh, that is a very fancy colour scheme for black with like bits of red and gold too. Because with normal Astra Militarum, you see, well, the default Cadians, they're like army green, like olive green, I think it's called, and then like drabs for like beiges and browns for the fabric and whatnot. It's like black with like gold and red. That, well, that's probably my bias, but that makes me think of more Black Templars or maybe Sisters of Battle. But there are so many regiments out there, then I'm sure there's some stuff that I'm not aware of. Like what? Oh, there's some cool regiment which has like scaled armor, and they're like the something dragons or whatever. And I know they're known for a darker scheme. Yeah, olive drab and tan/khaki. Good old default military colours. Now, this is big chunky chest piece. This is slanted. There's nothing above it covering it in the shade, and this is going to be like one of the big focus points of the model. So going in with a lot of highlights will work. Well, will help make it look good and detail it, and it is appropriate like lighting wise to do the highlights. Bolt action shums. Ooh, really going military inspired. Now there is this big like empty patch in the middle of it, in the middle of this piece. I was wondering what to do with, because I could do like an orange stripe down the middle. I could put a transfer for the AdMech logo, do some decals there, or I could do some like pre-shading, some like panel shading, where I will try and do the panel shading, because if I do mess it up, like I said, there's other stuff that I can put there too to cover it up. So it's where I'm going to like brighten the middle of the panel. It's something I'm mostly familiar with from Gundam paints. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, Sherman. I'm not super up to date with my tanks, but I can recognize the name of that as a tank, which means it's a big important tank, which is probably used in a lot of places, which is definitely the Russ. It's always interesting using looking to real world inspiration, and it's particularly appropriate to talk about it for this build because you can see this tank head is based on the M3 Grant / M3 Lee, which, like I said, I'm not super knowledgeable about tanks, but I looked it up because it was part of this build, and I saw that. It's like, oh yeah, I can see where that does the shape, and it's probably also where the Onager itself got its inspiration from. Sherman was the workhorse of the British, Canadian, American, and French tank forces. Damn, mostly allies. A lot of people. Now I'm getting might be going a bit too heavy with my dry brushing because might be too close to C, but I am starting to chip away at the previous layer of highlighting, dry brush highlighting. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus. Like just on the very upper edge of this like lookout cover. It was easy to manufacture upgun and armor. Oh, something like reliable and easy to reuse is nice, but although the chipping on this might work as a cheat for like weathering and chipping, but now I know it's gotten that far, I will be careful. And what I was saying before with the pre-shading, where I will shade the middle of a panel, where I'm going to use this small brush. I'm gonna get a tad, and then I'm gonna like stipple some lighter patches in the very middle. And when some paint is on there stippling, I'm gonna dry brush it in. Because it works well on like armor panels in particular, because they do take some wear and tear, and so it can look like a type of weathering too. And I am going to go extra fancy just because this is the big central chest piece, and go up and go even brighter a tad. And where is it? This is the next layer up of grey I use. It is Administratum grey. It's very light grey, almost bordering on a white, but because it is so bright, I am going to be very careful with it. I'm going to get the tiniest dab, really brush it in, and again mix it in with the previous colour that's already on there to help smooth the transitions even further. And pretty much only focusing on hitting the upwards facing edges. What else are any particularly noticeable parts? There's going to be the tank, the turret, which only focusing on the upper edges, and then the... Oh no! Oh no. The tip of the barrel has come off the muzzle brake, I think it's called. That is rather unfortunate. Okay, so how do we fix this? It is a very finicky position, so just straight up using plastic glue might not work, so I will see if I can pin it. Here is my pin vise, hand drill, whatever you call it, with, I believe, the smallest drill bit I've got in it. Yep. I'm gonna use my knife to make sure it's a nice flat surface, so when I'm drilling the hole will be able to go straight in and not be knocked off course by any rough surface. I'll do the same for the other side. And then I'm gonna drill as close to the center as possible. Just looking at it from all different sides to try and make sure it's lined up as straight and as central as possible. Okay, that's the hole in that side drilled, and we do the same for the muzzle brake. Oh, and I've gone through. That's fine because that's the thin part. So here's the paper clip we used to clean the glue bottle earlier. Got some spare. Gonna use my heavier duty clippers to cut through it because that metal is too thick and would damage my normal ones. I'm gonna insert that into the area I drilled before. Just to get about, gonna need way less than that because I didn't drill very far. And now it's getting too finicky to hold with my fingers, so I will use some tweezers. is a tad off center. Okay, that's mostly good. I'm going to glue that paperclip in. I'm using a tiny amount. And that should be as good as new. So long as nobody here tells people that I broke it in the first place. Okay. Now where was I? Dry brushing the extra final layer of highlights. Okay. Brush is still good to use. An extra thing, hold it carefully to make sure I definitely don't drop it this time, and making sure I'm only hitting the upper corners. Now, because it is tricky here, because the highlights will look way too noticeable here, but that's basically just because it's only grayscale and there's no other colours to distract it from. This is something I've learnt doing this with both my Admech and my Black Templars, where their scheme starts off very colourless, and so stuff you do becomes a lot more noticeable. So going heavy here looks way more noticeable than it will be once all the other colours are added in. So I am trying to remain calm and going, oh no, it's way too much, oh no, it's by saying, no, it's fine. It probably won't be as much, it'll probably be barely noticeable later. And just trying to do the same to any other upwards facing areas later too. And even if it is too much later, then I can still go back and like fix it with the other more normal greys, or even like wash it all, do a wash to like bring it all back down together. But yeah, These are the shoulder panels, which stick out a lot. There's nothing above them, so they'll be getting the full lighting effect. So if I'm going to go extreme anywhere, I'm going to go extreme on the edges of here too. And then, I think that's everything I need the big brush for, but I'm not going to wash it just yet. And then I will get out the little brush to go back over once more what I talked about earlier with where any lights are going to be. I'm going to highlight around them just because not only one will it make it seem more believable that they're lights if they're brightening up everything around them, but also just painting them with a brighter color now will make it easier when I need to paint them with their other brighter color later, because I'm going to need to go over these with a white, because I'm going to paint these lights by doing a white and then using a contrast effect over them. And so if I paint them with a light grey, then that's going to make painting a white over them much easier. I may only need like 1 or 2 coats instead of like 3 or 4. There's a light on the top of the gun, 2. Where else are lights? There's a light on top of the tank turret. And there is a light on the hip armor. And I think that is that for the dry brushing the main colour. And it's been 2 hours since I started streaming. I'm still ready to stream for a bit longer, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and hand paint any of the same colours I need to. Like, if there are any small silver details in the middle of grey armour parts. Ooh! You got some armigers to ally with your Imperial Guard, or you got some doing a whole Imperial Knight army on its own? Now, this was a bit of a heavy dry brushing session, so... oh yeah, Feudal World Platoon. Yeah! Knights work super well, because their whole lore thing is they're owned by knight houses, which obviously go well for the feudal stuff. I like the idea of knights just because they're like 40k mecha, and they can be flavoured into whatever way, and they're good parts. Like, this is mostly an homage for its mecha parts. I have 3 as allies, so... Yeah, the ally rules are what? 3 armigers or 1 Questoris? Or I might just be pulling those numbers out of nowhere. It is kind of awkward how armigers come with 2 in a pack, but then a lot of the rules talk about them in 3s, so yeah. But GW do that a lot. And I am out of paint water. Oh, one of the fancy new Cerastus kits, yeah. They do look cool. I do want to do something with one day, but converting them is hard. Like, armigers are probably the easiest to convert because they're small, so you can use a lot of parts from other things, a lot of smaller things, and they work well. But when you get up to the Questoris and the armigers, the Questoris and the Cerastuses, then they're so big, it's hard to find other parts to kit bash with them. Like, I'd love to do a Cerastus Baneblade kit bash, but ooh, new 10th rules. A battle line now, so you can have 6. Ooh, how many armigers have I got now? Got 1, 2, 3. I got 4 armigers. Yeah, I was thinking with this build as an armiger. That's just one variant, and there are 2 variants. Oh yeah, there's the Helvrin and I can't remember the other one. But there's the one with the autocannons and then the one with the flame. Warglaive, that's the one. But I was thinking with these 2 armigers, with this armiger, oh yeah, there's the Forge World ones which have like, do they have a conversion beam or a plasma thing? But they have an energy type weapon. But yeah, I was thinking with this new armiger, I have enough to probably stop saying I have Imperial Knights as tacked onto my admech or whatever, and say just no, I have Imperial Knights now. Because I have 4 armigers and 1 Questoris. Conversion beam and other disgusting options. Yeah, well, that's Forge World. They're premium. They come with fancy options. It's been 2 hours, and I need to refresh my paint water. I'll be back in a minute. Just gonna stretch my legs, refill my water. Well, refill my drinking water and refill my painting water. And we're back. Just doing a quick stretch before I sit down for another hour of painting. Okay. Whew. So, let's take a look at what we've got. We are painting the grey and metal bits, but any of the small bits by hand now. So, gonna just reorganize my desk a little to do a very quick cleaning pass while I can. Don't need the super glue, can put that away. Going to be using Iron Hands and Mechanicus because those are the base colours, the rest were just highlights. Okay, so what silver and grey parts on the grey and silver parts is there to paint? So we need to clean up any like overspill I had with oh, I wasn't even done finished washing my brushes first. Don't want to allow them to dry with a bunch of paint in the bristles. Now this dry brush did see a lot of use, so I am going to use some paint thinner. There it is. Just to make sure it's really clean. Some Tamiya acrylic X20A thinner, warning, flammable, alcoholic, whatever. It does stink, so try not to spill it if I can remember. Just really try to clean out any paint that got stuck in there. That should be good, and then just do the same with the small brush. Don't need to go as crazy since I didn't get as much paint on it, but still want to just make sure no paint gets stuck in the bristles. Okay, dry brush is cleaned, and we can move on to the next step. How's that looking? Could barely even tell it was broken. Okay, now on to hand painting. And this is my go-to brush for hand painting. It is a Raphael Kolinsky France 8404 size 0. I use that for most stuff infantry. I'll see if I can get away with a bigger size first, just because it is a bigger unit. I'm going to go with, I think this was like a red cabin Kolinsky brush pack. And I can get rid of my dry brushing palette. And where is my other palette? Because I do have a slightly better palette I use when I'm actually when I'm properly painting. I say slightly better, it's still cardboard. Because again, I'm a bit of a cheapskate, but it's gotten me by. I don't want to fork out for a wet palette when usual will do. There it is. More cardboard, but this time it has a layer of sellotape over it, just so the paint doesn't dry into the cardboard, and I've gotten some good use out of it. God knows how many layers of paint there are on this thing. I've been using it for years. And we're going to start with looking over any of the things we painted grey and seeing if there are any bits of metal we need to paint. So there is the shin armour. Do I paint the rivets now, or do I save the rivets for some painting detailing? I'll paint the rivets now. Why not? But yeah. Well, while I got the camera on, can you get a nice shot of what it looks like now it's been dry brushed with a layer or two of highlights? You can see I didn't need to fuss too much over details and just hit it with a dry brush with a bright colour on the edges, and that was an easy way to get a lot of highlights done quickly. That is not looking too nice. I need to clean up some of the paint that's spilt around the edge. And to really make sure it's shaken well, I do have a massage gun somewhere. I got it on a good deal because, this will help me when I'm done at the gym and help me with my sore muscles, but it's got way more use as a paint shaker than it has a muscle gun. And it's out of battery, perfect timing. I will put that to the side to go charge later, and we'll just have to do with a good old handshake. Okay, so what did we need to paint metal? Get some on the brush, get some water to thin it down properly, mix it on the palette to see how that looks. That is a tad wet. Let's get some more paint, brush that in, see how that looks. That is still a tad on the wet side, but it doesn't look as bad as before. So, the armour. We're looking at painting the rivets, and for such a small bit, I would prefer it on the thicker side. So, those rivets aren't tiny, so they're not too stressful to paint. And I will probably go back and hit them with a highlight when I'm highlighting later, when I'm like properly edge highlighting with a brush lighter, but just getting a base coat while I can, just to help make it look extra fancy. And you can see since it's finicky, I am like putting my hands, anchoring them on my desk, and then also touching my fingers behind them, keeping my hands touched behind what I'm painting, just to try and have everything touching to minimize any like shakiness, just to make sure I'm as steady as possible. And then what I'm doing here is the hands, there is armor on the outside, but there is on the inside there is like all types of joints and mechanical details, so I want to paint those silver. Just because I did that on my Titanfall armature, and I think that looked really neat, having the armor outside, but then the exposed metal stuff you could see glimpses of from around. It is tricky to work around the already painted armor bits and being careful not to go over them, and so I'm again just anchoring stuff on the edge of the desk. Probably not great for the camera view wise, but I can at least explain it while I'm doing it. Just unclipping it so I can hold it and make it easier to grab, just to make it easier to paint and reach all the weird insides. Ah. Did hit some of the armor bits, but still gonna repaint the grey anyway, so we'll go and clean it up later. Yeah, paint the rivets there too. Oh yeah, we were talking about the Forge World armature. Yeah, Moirax with Volkite veil glass? Fancy name. I was wondering, it's like, oh, how can I kitbash that? Because anything from Forge World is resin, and I don't like working with resin, even if it's a normal build, and I'll take any excuse to kitbash. So I was thinking, how would I kitbash one of the Forge World armatures? And what's got a conversion beam and Volkite. Volkite you can easily substitute for plasma parts and just paint it like red or orange instead. And I was looking, since I had both the parts for an armature and an onager out on my desk while kitbashing this, I did see, oh hey, the onager's plasma gun looks like it would be able to fit on the front of one of the armature weapons. So I was thinking, oh, could make one that way. And I could even run this as an one of those armatures with Volkites, because I mentioned before, but I magnetized this weapon on my on the chest, so I can slot it in, magnetize that, and I also magnetized the weapon, all the weapon options for my previous onager, so I can just grab the plasma weapon for that and throw it on there too. And so if push comes to shove, this could be a Volkite armature. The magic of kit bashing. Okay, where was I? Painting silver, and I think I've just... Yes, I just did that hand. What else is there to paint? There is a few rivets on a few more armor panels to rivet. The texture on this rivets hasn't come out very well. I don't know whether that's just because I used too much super glue. I also need to paint the handles while I'm at it. Don't know whether that's because I used too much super glue when first attaching the rivets, or my spray paint rattle can, it looked a little weird when I was first painting it earlier today. I'm not sure whether that's just because the can was nearly emptying, or it was the weather because it's been particularly cold outside, or I sprayed too closely, but I went over it with a second and third coat and that mostly fixed it, but it does have this odd texture on it now, specifically around the rivets, so I'll need to pay extra attention to that next time I spray, just to make sure it doesn't keep happening. Yep, that's riveted, and the same for the hip armor. The hip armor has a bit more because it has 2 spots to rivet. It has the handle, and it also has, I don't know, these weird light mounts. I do also need to paint... You can see on the, let's see if you can see. Yeah, on the light itself, there are metal braces crossing it in a grid pattern. I do need to paint those metal, but I'm not going to do that right now because I need to paint them a brighter white again later for the actual, to paint it look like the light is actually on. And so I'm not going to paint the silver now because I would just go over and undo the I'd undo any metal I paint now when I do the lights later. Oh, there's a clover. And now I'm on to cleaning up any metallic details that I hit when I was dry brushing the grey. So I'm just re-going over any metal bits on the arms just to make sure they aren't greyed out. And the other arm. Mainly just the handles. Oh man, there's rivets on the back of them. I've got to that on the other one. I'll go back after I've done this one. Just the usual of going back from the pot, refilling, adding a dip of water to make sure it's thinned properly. Although, I think you can be a bit more, you can worry a bit less about metallics being thinned. Don't know what, but they are different. They are react most kind of differently, so you don't need to be as precise with thinning your paint with metallics as you do like regular acrylic colours. But it's just good practice. And it is riveted, and I think, yeah, do need to clean up some of the greys on that, which I'll go back and do on the grey pass. Some rivets on here too. This is the tricky part. We get into the built-in rivets, which are much smaller and much more finicky. They are harder to actually paint without overspilling. So it's at this point where I may switch back to, well, not switch back, just switch to where is it? My regular Raphael Kalinsky. What else is there? There's stuff here. Yeah, too finicky. Time to switch to the small brush. Rinse off this brush. Because sometimes I won't paint the rivets. I'll save that for like when I'm highlighting, because that's just, it's similar scale of work where it's doing very precise, finicky movements, or precise, finicky painting areas. But if I'm doing the rest of the rivets now, I might as well save myself some time later. And back to my good old reliable Raphael Kalinsky France 8404 size 0. I've had this for years. It's still got its tip. I paint a lot of stuff with it. I recommend it. It's pricey, like I think it's like 15 to 20 quid for just the one brush, but it's outlasted many other cheaper brushes. It's outlasted maybe an more expensive brush too. Oh boy, that is an intimidating sight. I was just looking at the front of this, and can you see how many rivets there are? Yeah, you know, just all around the edges, and whew. Well, complaining about it won't get it done. doing a similar thing I was before, where I'm like bracing and having my hands as much together and anchoring them on a steady surface, where I'm holding the piece I'm painting in this hand, and while I'm painting with this hand with like my front two fingers, I am like touching it with my other fingers just to keep as many points of contact, just so the hand shaking shouldn't mess it up. Just holding on to it should eliminate as much shaking as possible, along with, you know, having both my wrists pressed against the edge of the desk. Now this is tricky because these is painting a small bit, so you don't want a lot of paint on the brush. Because the moment, if you have too much paint on the brush, the moment you touch finger painting, all the paint will spill out onto it. But at the same time, the less you have on the brush, the more frequently you'll need to like add more paint to the brush. So it's a bit risky. Going, oh, I could get more on the brush and just save the amount of times I have to go back. But then that makes it more likely you will spill and... Okay, that's not bad. I was complaining for nothing. It's mostly done now already. Ah! While I was dry brushing, I should have dry brushed the base too. So I've got the base over on the other side of the... well, somewhere else in the room. And I was going to dry brush some of that too. Oh well. Part of the floodlights need to be repainted metal because they were hit with the grey. What else needs to be done? Yeah, I'm on the metal. I need to clean up some of the metal on the areas where the metal and the grey meet, just because it's spilled a little over with dry brush, but that's just how dry brushing goes. And likewise on the other side. Being careful to hold it in the right place. Don't want to get any more paint on my fingers. Already accidentally painted my nails with the primer and got a few splotches at other times. Or tiny rivets. Unfortunately, while the head turret is riveted, they are larger rivets. I am a tad worried that it will clash too much. Like I want to be consistent with all the different stuff, so the tiny rivets here and the larger rivets there and the medium-sized... Hopefully the medium-sized rivets I added on the plasticard armor panels. Hopefully that will, I don't know, try and blend it a bit better, showing that, oh, rivets can come up... There can be all different types of rivets, not just these two, so... Maybe that'll help, maybe I'm just hoping it'll save me. But we'll find out. At least they're not, like, comedically sized giant bolt rivets like the orcs do. I'm thinking. There are some like details of like wires coming out to the sides here, and how do the wires look on other models? Or how I've painted them on the other models, I mean. Okay, the wires themselves are this dark metal, and then there's like the brackets and ports where the wires come into and go from. I did those copper, and that looked good, so I'll paint the wires on the side here metal while I can, while I've got that out. Oh no. I accidentally touched the exhaust pipe, which was drying paint. I'll go over it and fix it, but it's getting to the point where I've painted all over and it's getting rather finicky. I think that's it in terms of what I need to paint. If there's more later, I'll go over it later, but at this point it's risking messing it up. What's left? Just the turret? I think it's just the turret. Let's paint the turret. There's the light cap, I guess. Well, I did say I wasn't going to paint the wire grid brackets on the other light. This light is bigger, so hopefully I'm not wasting my time painting it now. I should be able to paint around it a bit better. Painting the parts of the smoke launcher that got hit with the grey. Doing the same with the turret weapon barrel. And once all those big bits are sorted, then I can begin on the rivets. They are big, but there is a lot of them. That is not good. I missed and overspilled on the very first one. I was a bit worried about this, I don't know, this faceplate thing at the front of the turret. Because I didn't have any perfectly flat ones because I got this whole thing like with second-hand bits, and I didn't have any perfectly flat ones. The only things there's like an attachment for like 4 bolters on the front, and obviously that wouldn't work with putting it to a single turret. So I did my best to like cut off the bolter attachment parts, and it left a bit of a rough texture, and I just had my fingers crossed that the texture would be fixed once it was painted dry brushed. And maybe what's next? I think some of the hatch details on this need to be silver. See, there's some parts on here where I haven't figured out what exact color I want them, but I know that they need to be a metal, and I'm just thinking, is it going to be silver now? And well, is it going to be silver and I do it now, or is it going to be copper and I do it later? But I'll do it silver now. If it's going to be copper later, then I'll just paint it while I'm doing the copper later. See, this type of camera setup, I feel like I'm wasting a lot of space, because so much of the painting is going on this very side edge right here. I'm wondering, it's like, oh, is it worth trying to figure out a different camera setup? Looks like some painting tutorials, it looks like they have them like at the painter's chest, looking forward. So I was wondering how I'd do that. Like, have it's like resting on the very edge of the desk. There is a weird small hatch at the back of the turret. I don't know whether it's to like shoot out spent ammo, but it's getting painted. Okay. Just being careful with how I put it down to make sure none of the wet paint is touching the areas, and also none of the parts that are particularly weak that I accidentally broke off earlier. Make sure none of those parts have much pressure on them. Just really washing the brush now, because I know that metallics in particular can get in the very top of the brush, not the tip, the base of the brush. And once paint gets dried in there, then that really starts fraying it. Like I said, this has been a good brush that's lasted me a while, so cleaning it, doing at least an alright job cleaning it has helped it keep well. That's the silver. In a second, gonna go back over with the grey just to clean up any bits I missed out there. Whew. Just taking a breather while I can. Some nice refreshing water. Since I have been particularly hunched while painting that, I am gonna go and do another stretch before getting back to hunching and painting even more. Ugh. Okay. Whew. Had a breather, had a stretch, ready to get back to painting. That is the metal done for, so we are back to the base grey, good old Mechanicus standard grey. And what do we need to fix? The arm panels are mostly grey, didn't spill any doing the rivets there, but I did mess up slightly with the hands while painting the metallic insides. So let's just clean up any mistakes I made there. And also while I'm here, just getting going over any parts the dry brushing wasn't quite able to get, like the fingertips appear not to have been adequately covered. But I don't want to like go over and do a whole second layer of paints with the hand brush, because that would waste the time of all the dry brushing we did, but also it would get rid of some of like the depth we did with like the 2 layers of highlighting with the dry brushing. So it is just quick spots, any obvious mistakes. If there are, we fix them. And if there are, not fretting over any non-obvious details. Is that good? There's one more overspill of the silver there. And again on the other side of the thumb. But that is good. Any on the hip piece? No, it's good. The rest of the leg armor. Any on here? Nope, 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 nope. Nope. On the arms, there are a few points where the silver and the grey are right up against each other on the arm, so there are some spots that just more strongly define the barrier or the separation. So just going over the edge where the armor meets the inner arm. So where the sides of the arm are the armor, and the inner arm has all that exposed, lovely mechanical detail with some wires bursting out and some handles barely keeping them in. Just making sure that they have their own properly defined colour barriers, colour edges, where one colour ends and the other begins. Yes, that's the way to put it down without getting paint all over my nice new fresh desk mat. My old one from my last it was on my last stream. It was getting a bit worn. I was getting too lazy with not getting my cutting mat out, and had too many dents and cuts and nicks in the old one. So I've got a nice new fresh one. Yeah, there too. Anywhere else? That should be good. Oh, that bit. Let's see how it looks on the official model. Let's check the reference of the Games Workshop page. Oh, have they? They better have had the 360 photos back on. They were very useful for painting and kit bashing references, but they weren't there when they first swapped over the store. No, they're still missing the 360s. Oh man. That's a shame. Do my best to paint over that dodgy texture spot I mentioned earlier. Seeing if I can just clean up any areas that... Because you can see it's kind of awkward right here, where the grenade launcher sits. Because it does cover a bit of an area underneath it, which was unable to be. I was unable to hit with the dry brush. But as I mentioned before, don't want to do too much with this because then that get rid of all the nice work I did with the building up the different highlights with the dry brush. Because if you hand paint a large chunk, it will become noticeable. It's like, oh, that was hand painted, because it doesn't have the same kind of gradient and highlighting as the rest of the model does. So it's a bit of a balancing act with painting enough to fix the early mistakes, but not painting too much to undo the work from earlier. Okay. Should just be this part where I need to clean up some of the grey paints on. It would help if it was in focus. There it is. Mix it was dry brush the greys, dry brush the metals, but now just fixing any mistakes. Like another spot I mentioned with the arm where the metals went right up against the armour. And similar case here where got not great coverage of grey on the grey part and not great coverage on the metal of the metal part. So I can fix that. This isn't a prime viewing area where a lot of people's eyes will be drawn to, just because it'll be covered by like the shadow of the arm and whatnot, but still don't want to have any super obvious mistakes. And this bit too, this will be covered by the turret, but it won't be completely covered. So just want to fix the most glaring areas of lack of coverage. And I'm not sure... I don't know, I think I might start the details tomorrow. Well, I say start the details. Starting with doing stuff like copper and orange bits. I'm going to be doing some masking with with clear tape. To painting some stripes. Maybe down the front, probably on the sides of the arms. Where else? That's a bit spotty. That's good. That's good. See, a lot of the bits that don't have good coverage, that my first thought is to, oh no, go fix that. They are spots where it would make sense that it's darker, just because the magic of dry brushing, if it's a hard to reach spot that the light wouldn't naturally reach, then it's also likely that the dry brush will not be able to reach there too. But while we've got all this paint out, let's get a simple coat on the base. Now I just need to recheck my reference to see exactly how I want to do the colours on the base. Stolen, well, not stolen, just looking at some lovely Titanfall inspiration. I believe it's like some random dry dock. I mentioned it on my build post on Twitter. But I just want to get a reference for the kind of colours used there. So the greys are very patchy, so I might try and do some more stippling with the dry brush. Or maybe break out the I don't know, the packing foam. Just because I'd like to get some practice in with stippling with that. Because it is a brighter grey for the inspiration example I'm looking at, but if I do go with a brighter grey for the base, then the base will be more visibly noticeable than the model, which is a no-no. The base should be there to help frame the model, but it shouldn't take too much attention away from it. And that is a problem I run into when doing bases on such a boring grey scheme like my AdMech. It does limit my base styles. But here is what I got for the base so far. There's some simple paneling, primed black like the rest of the model. I just I super glued something on the underside so I could hold it on the stick for painting. There you go. Just getting rid of that. But yes, these are going to be I don't know, concrete, some type of hard paneling. This is going to get some texture paint. Those wires are going to be painted. That's a grate, drain grate, covering, whatever. Then I'm going to have some stripes, maybe some hazard stripes or markings on the surface there, just to have them somewhat visually interesting and have them thematic too, because it is going to be a similar base style to this Cerberus Raider conversion I did, where you can see I got panels there, had some wires running between them, and a nice stripe on the corner. It's going to be quite similar to this in a few ways, because you can see this also has the orange stripes running across the limbs. Always happy to have a decent backlog of models to look back to for reference, because you can go, oh, I wonder how that would look on this model, and say, oh well, I've done that before. Let's just directly take a look at it and put them side by side to see how that works. See, I'm not sure I want to do Mechanica Standard Grey. Because like I said, different type of grey. So let's see what other greys I have. In terms of blacks, I have Abaddon black, I have Corax black, which is a slight off black. And in terms of greys, here is Dark Reaper, which is... I don't really like it. For this, I mean. But then I do have Eshin Grey, which I do prefer. Because I talked a bit about greys before, where I prefer to lean into the warmer side, where it has hints of browns more than it does hints of blues. It is something that happened, I wouldn't say exactly unexpectedly, but when I was first deciding on an AdMech scheme, I used Mechanica Standard Grey because, oh hey, that name works, I'll test it out. And it is has bluey, greenier notes than I would have liked. But that On the other side, on the flip side, that worked well because the bluey parts contrast the orange parts better, so it kind of the colour scheme matured, even though it's not what I initially wanted, and so it's not a grey I like normally, but it works for this. Works for my AdMech. But if I'm going for a whole different grey now, then I'll see if Eshin works. Just make sure this is dry. I did clean it earlier thinking I was done, but might as well paint it while everything's out. Do I start off with the dry brush or do I start off with the sponging, stippling thing? I'll start off with the dry brush. And it is a dangerous, well, not dangerous, I'm not confident in it, but it's, why not try it out on the base? It's just the base. If I mess up the base, I can like cover it with a bunch of texture paint or dirt or weathering or whatever and just really dirty and grime it up. Where's my dry brushing palette? But yeah, if I mess up the base, it's not the end of the world. There are ways I can fix it. If I mess up the model, that's going to be way harder to fix. So can you tell this side of the palette was used to paint some Necrons? With all the greens and dark metals. Similar thing to what I said before with the first coat of the Mechanicus Standard Grey over the model, where it's like, it's not going to look good first coat, especially over such flat panels. Dry brushing helps textured stuff with edges, but these are large flat panels. It's not going to look good first things first. It's just mostly just getting a first layer down to work with. Then the second layer will have something to stick to and it'll look way better. Might go a bit heavier because it's barely noticeable. But again, I'm cautious because nah, that's fine. Because even after I've done this dry brushing, I will need to come back and dry brush it again because I am going to add texture paint to it, and then just to make the texture paint look a bit better, I will wash and dry brush that. So the base will get more dry brushing later no matter what. But give that a second to fully dry. Rehydrate while I'm at it. Okay, that's enough time. Let's see how it's dried, because dry brushing will dry way quicker than hand painting, because part of the deal is the paint's already dry. But let's do this second layer of Eshin, and then let's see how that goes. Just trying out to see how what kind of different patterns or brush strokes different methods have. Because it's the base. Like I said, if I play around and mess up here, it's not a big deal. So I'm seeing if I can do anything interesting with it. I think that's the brightest I am going to get it with Eshin Grey. I don't want to go straight to Administratum, but I will try out Dawnstone. Just need to give it a second to dry. Oh, thank you. It's just the base. They're going for, like I said, some kind of dry docky, concretey type of thing, so I do need to build up the greys on it, but I'm a bit, like I said, unsure how, because I don't want it to be brighter than the model itself, because that won't work. But let's see how Dawnstone looks on it, because that is a bit of a brighter one. But yeah, can test it out, so I can easily make the base darker and bring it back down with the use of washes, because I do want, on the bases I do use like a brown wash, because that makes it look dirtier, whereas I normally use a black wash for the model itself, just because normally you want to use a wash that matches the colour of the model. It's coming off neat. Like I said, seeing what playing around with textures, seeing what I can, how different things end up. Because dry brushing, you can brush, but you can also stipple with it for some interesting different effects too. Like that is how I do my stripes. I section off a layer with masking tape. I mask off a layer and then I dab, stipple, whatever you call it, because if you brush regularly over the masking tape area, then there's a decent chance that the paint will get under the edges of the masking tape and leave a nasty, well, it will defeat the point of the masking tape and like bleed under it and not have a nice straight line. I know there are methods where you can like, paint in the base color. It's like if I'm painting orange stripes over grey, you put the masking tape on, you do a layer of grey, and then you do a layer of orange of the stripe you want. But I think stippling leaves a nice, it doesn't leave a full block color, it leaves a slightly worn color, but I think that works well because it's some built-in weathering for the stripes. Because I take what little weathering where I can, because I don't like to do big chunks of weathering, because all my models they're ideas I like and come up with and don't want to see damaged too badly. So it's like, I'll take a little weathering, make it look natural, but I don't want my stuff too destroyed because I like it too much. Which, I don't know, it's not a great attitude to have for, Warhammer, Grimdark of the Future, there's only war and everything, but, it's thematically appropriate maybe. Having some reverence for the machines. I'm liking the look of the texture on that. I might even try to bring it up a bit more with some, might even go a brighter layer of do the next grey up. But like I said, that is causing signals in my mind. Hey, that's too bright. Be careful. But I can bring it down easy enough with washes and contrasts. Like a contrast I really like using is Basilicanum Grey, because that's like, it is a grey, it's not a black. It works kind of like a chunkier wash. You put it over something to make it look worn. Like, I painted a skeleton with metal, and I came out looking too bright. I wanted it to look more worn, more battered, more dirty, because it was a skeletal warrior that was just like coming out of the ground. And so I put a layer of Basilicanum Grey on top of it, and it really did make it look like, just one layer of it made it look like worn. And because contrast works similarly, they do have similar properties to washes, where they settle in recesses, and so they just they adapt to the model. They work with its curves and shapes. And so I can just now I've tried that out before. It's like I do have that in like my knowledge, my painting knowledge repertoire or whatever, where it's just, if I need that type of look, if I need to ding it up or dirty it down, Basilicanum Grey. I think this is looking decent now. It's got a nice, like, worn, concrete-y type texture. There are a few bits where it comes out through too strong, but I will shade it with the wash later, and that will tint it all in the same colour, so it'll bring it together a bit better. But while I am dry brushing, I do need to paint that grate and get a base colour on that wire while I'm at it. But yeah, this brush is a bit too big for it. This is a big dry brush. Takes up a lot of paint to paint a lot of stuff, but the pain in the ass to clean. Kind of one of the reasons why I haven't used the even bigger brush so much. I mean, fortunately the large brush works instead of the extra large, but I still dread cleaning such a big thing. It's like drying the brush off will like dampen most of this kitchen roll, so it will make it, I will have to like change out and get a new one, just because it's gotten too damp to really properly use after cleaning one brush. Okay, that's good. Then where's the smaller dry brush? To just get the base layer of metals. And I am just going to do the darker metal here, Because it is the base. We don't want it to be too bright or stand out. We want it to be worn. And if you really want to go fancy and make it really worn, you can go over and hit it with like a layer of rust or grime or any of that lovely weathering type stuff, because like I said, I'm a bit too protective of my models, I guess. I don't want to weather them and destroy them or wear them down too much, but the base is the base. It's a chance to experiment a bit more, it's a chance to weather it a bit more. There we go. So let me just double check one last time, because I think I've done everything I want to do with the colours that are out, and getting any more colours out will like add a big chunk more time onto it, which I'm wanting to wrap up soonish. So we got the base, nice and dirted up and patterned with whatever rough stuff. We got the model itself, where we're able to do a good layer. Let's just have a nice quick test assembly. I'm not going to put everything on, but just going to put the biggest parts together to just see how it looks now. We've got the base. Now we've got the basics painted. On the other hand, so yeah, how's that come together? We've just done the grey armour and the metal bits, but the dry brushing allowed us to cover a lot, allowed us to gave us a built-in level of highlighting and shading without too much effort, which I love. Oh yeah, while we're here, I will start a bit of, I'll do the texture paint on the base, because the texture paint needs to dry overnight, so I might as well do it as one of the last things now. I use the technical paint Astro Granite Debris. Is this an empty one? Let's see. No, it's the stuff in there. The stuff in there I got over my finger. Oh. But shake that up to get it going, because the style of base I do is like, I don't know, it's kind of like industrial area but a bit destroyed, like industrial ruins, and I use Astro Granite Debris for that because whole fancy lore reason where it's, my AdMech, their Forge world was destroyed and they're still fully recovering it, so it's destroyed mechanical industrial type stuff. And so it's supposed to be like a destroyed and lifeless world, so I think the greys work well, even if they don't make anything, even if they don't make for an interesting thing, it fits my OC. So yeah, we've got the panels, and we're going to texture this big area, and I do want to get down a palette, just to make sure I don't spill anything. And Astro Granite Debris is, unfortunately, being discontinued by Games Workshop. because it is just a chunkier version of the Astro Granite, and they are just no discontinuing all the chunkier versions of existing of other bases, which is rather unfortunate. They say you can just get the same effects by just applying 2 coats of the non-chunky version, but I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'll probably take a look around the texture paints other places have, because I know, like, in the last year or two, Games Workshop changed their recipe for a lot of their washes too, where it made them thinner, and then that changed the look of a lot of armies by changing the wash while doing it, because washes change a lot, and fortunately other third-party companies had washes that were more similar to the original one before Games Workshop changed theirs. And so I did that. I swapped out from Games Workshop's Nuln Oil to Army Painter's, I think it's Dark Tone. Yeah, time to stock up. The problem is I came to this news late. By the time I heard about it, my local Games Workshop was already out. So I do need to take a look at I've got 2 locals. I've got a Games Workshop and I've got a Element Games, which is like, that's better for third party and non GW stuff, as well as just better price in general. So I do need to check how many bottles of the Astrogranite debris I can pick up from the non-Games Workshop hobby shop. Because I wasn't able to stock up on Nuln Oil and Astrogranite, but fortunately enough, the Army Painter had a nice version. And so once, just to explain what I'm doing, have I tried Goblin Gaming? I've heard of them. I've bought some stuff from there before. I will check now that you mention it. So thank you for the recommendation. Ooh, that is very lucky for you. I'm like, I have 3, but 2 are Games Workshops for me. So just to explain what I'm doing, once I've spread the texture paint down, I'm kind of like stippling, so when it dries, it's like a rough, uneven texture. And then just add 1 more little dab on the other side of the cables. A lot of non-Games Workshop places do reward points. Like, my non-Games Workshop local is Element Games, and they have reward points, and that's been very useful because not only do they have stuff cheaper than Games Workshop, it's like there's a reason to keep shopping there. I mean, I would say I don't know why Games Workshop don't do their own reward points, but they're the biggest in the business. They don't need to. It would be nice if they did, but who knows? I'm wondering if I should like try to spread any streaks of texture paint down onto the rest of the model, just to, make it look like the ruins are taken over, but I'll do a little, but looks-wise it doesn't really make too much difference since they're both grey. So I'll do some, like, piles where, like, the dirt has caught up and is, like, shifting onto the upper parts. But I'd say that is good for now. Just try to clean off this tool. That is as clean as I'm probably going to get it. Let's just see if I can scrape any extra bits of paint off. And that texture paint drying, I believe that is a good place to leave it. I may be back tomorrow continuing painting with the, a bit more interesting colours than greys and slightly shiny greys. I'll let you know on my Twitter if I do, because that's the place I post most often and keep most up to date with stuff. But thank you very much for coming and hanging out while I paint. And hopefully catch you around. Yeah. And thank you in particular, Cornish Knight. It's been nice chatting to you. See you tomorrow, maybe then.